What do you do when life takes an unexpected turn and you lose your spouse? If you're like my guest, Michelle, you let God work through that grief and He turns it into a flourishing writing and speaking ministry, helping widows around the world. I connected with Michelle on PodMatch, and she's a mom of 3 who lost her husband to cancer in 2020. She hosts the Widowed Too Soon podcast and is author of Widow Goals: Steps to Finding Peace When You Lose Your Spouse. Michelle's sharing her journey of starting a nonprofit, writing a book, launching a podcast, and of course, how she's using PodMatch to connect with new audiences and serve other people walking a similar path of grief. You're in for a treat today, so let's get to it. Hey, Michelle, welcome to Book Marketing Mania. I'm so thrilled you're here to serve my listeners today.
Oh, yes. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad we connected through PodMatch and just to get to know about your show. So I'm so sorry that you went through that. I'm just glad that God's championing you through this and allowing you to use this as your ministry and help other women that are going through this struggle. And I just want to talk to you about that because I know you have a podcast, you have a book, you have a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So walk us through how that came about.
So I was widowed May 23rd, 2020, after being married to my husband for 17 years. He had cancer, so it was a long illness. And when he passed away, I was a 41-year-old widow with 3 teenagers, and I couldn't find anyone in my circles to relate to.
Yeah.
I had, all my friends were married, and I didn't feel like I fit in at church anymore. It's really created for families. And I called all the churches. I looked everywhere to find a group for widows, and there was nothing. The only thing my church was like, well, you could start one. I was like a month into this. I was in no place to start a widows group. So as I began to heal, I decided that I wanted to give back and create what I wish would have been there for me. And so I actually started with social media. It sounds silly, but I started with TikTok, and I just started creating videos, like little helpful videos, like get out of bed and like what I called widow goals. That's how it started.
Yeah.
It was like, re-enter social spaces. Like I just had these little clips that I would do. And I found there was a huge widow community on both TikTok and Facebook, and not, like widows around my age in their 40s. It wasn't just the older people like I thought before I was widowed. And so after social media, the next thing I did, 11 months into my journey, I created my podcast. It's called Widowed Too Soon. It's still running. In May, it'll be 5 years that we've been doing it. And so how it started is I had a widower friend, and he had younger kids and I had teenagers, and we really wanted to point people to God. And so we decided to start this podcast. And so for 3 years, it was both of us doing it. It was mostly just us talking through our journeys. We had the widower perspective and the widow, and then different ages kids. And then we started doing more interviews, and he left the show almost 2 years ago. And that's when I decided to really go into interviews. And so now I interview widows and widowers all over the world and listen to their stories and how God helped them through it. And so that's part of what I did. And then at the same time, a couple years ago, I decided to start groups. Like I was talking about, there was nothing. And so I started a nonprofit called Widow Goals, which is widows helping widows not only survive, but thrive. And we started just meeting up at a coffee shop. I just put the word out there, put it on Facebook. Hey, if you know anybody widowed, this is where we're going. And we started doing it every single month. And that's been going, I think, almost 4 years now. And then I had other widowed friends who said, like, I want to do this in my area. How do you do it? So I taught it was kind of like a test group, 5 other friends, how to do it in their areas. Worked really well. So then I opened up applications for all over. And now we have about 30, and we are in currently US, Canada, and Australia. We just added Australia, which I'm super excited. Yeah. She got on my Zoom call the other night, and I was like, oh my gosh, our first Australia group. I'm so excited. And so we are now doing that. And one of our big things is retreats. And, we were just talking off air about how our last retreat was in Dallas, Texas. And it was amazing. Got snowed in, all the stuff, but it was like the most amazing thing. We had 72 registered, but 58 came because of the weather. We just opened registration for our October event, and we're going for 100. Please let your friends know that live in the area that are widowed. We'd love to have them. And so that's kind of how I got started. Oh, also the book. That's another part of what I did. So I started the book, not even a year after Luke died, and put it down for several years. And I'm glad I did because I didn't know near what I know now.
Uh-huh.
And it's called Widow Goals, Steps to Finding Peace When You Lose Your Spouse. And it's about 30 different goals that you could do in any order, kind of like the social media I had started. It's get out of bed, re-enter social spaces, have an eternal perspective, survive the holidays, how to solo parent, dating again, if that's something you choose. I tell people just skip the chapter if you're not
Uh-huh.
there or you don't care about that, because some people don't. And I put it down until about a year ago, January 25. It's about to be the 5-year anniversary of Luke's death. I want to finish this and release it on the anniversary of his death. So I did. I
Oh.
released it May 23rd, 2025 it was just like a really cool thing for me to aim for and to just honor him and to help other people. Because I've always thought if I had to go through this, I
Uh-huh.
want to help other people.
Yeah.
And so I completed it and people were loving it so much. It has widow reflections and it has widow questions, but I decided to go deeper and create a workbook. And I took like a test group through that and they
Uh-huh.
loved it. And I created a leader's guide. And so
Wow.
now my goal is it's like the grief share for widows and
Uh-huh.
widowers all over churches. I'm trying to get into churches. I have people who have told me all over the world that they're doing the groups. And so that's kind of how all of that started. I mean, it just started with,
Wow.
taking like what I've been through and like, how can I help people with this? What do I
Yeah.
wish would have been there? And so it's kind of like snowballed. And now, we're just on some huge momentum with just coming off the retreat and scheduling our next retreat. And then I've got local group like popping up in all other areas. And so I just support them online. I also have a large Facebook community that I have other admins that help me with that. So it's
Uh-huh.
just, I was actually just listening to a Christine Kane podcast today, and she was talking about her ministry and how you don't know when it starts. It's just like
Uh-huh.
one day at a time. Like God doesn't reveal it all. And then all of a sudden, here we are. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's me. Cause it's been, for about 5 years, I've been doing widow work because I've been
Uh-huh.
widowed almost 6 years. And it's just amazing to see what God has done. So that's a little bit about
Yeah. Oh, that's
what I do to
incredible. I
answer
mean,
your
that
question.
is, yeah, that's just my mind is blown. Just
It's
I
God, not
mean,
me.
yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And just but that you've been obedient through those steps and being, I mean, a busy mom that's been widowed
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm such a stuffer. Like I just, can see that I probably wouldn't take that. I mean, I say that, I don't know, but I mean, there's just so much emotions that go into that. Like, I can't even
Yeah.
imagine, Michelle, like that you then have taken, like each little step has led to something huge and that there's all these people that need the support. And, little did you
Hmm.
know that you're going to have to go through this and, then turn around and be able to help people with your message. I mean, that's just so, so powerful. And
Thank you.
yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, I don't know, my mind is blown just you saying that, summing it all up. And yeah, so let me ask you, so just thinking about going through hard things like that, did you ever struggle with, and maybe it's just something that comes natural to you, but did you ever struggle with getting behind the mic and talking about it, starting a podcast about this, or were you just like, I'm gung-ho, this is where God's calling me?
Yeah, I think God had prepared me. I had done a few podcasts before Luke died. I
Uh-huh.
had gone to my favorite Christian writing conference called She Speaks for
Uh-huh.
Christian
Yeah.
writers and speakers, and I learned about podcasting there.
Uh-huh.
And so I had started one called the Peace Cast, and it was like I would interview people who'd been through hard things. And then at the end, it turned into a place where I would just update the world about what was going on with Luke and his cancer progress.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I had already been doing it for a while. I've done a million YouTube channels. And so it came natural to me.
Yeah.
But my co host, he had a hard time with it. He was like, who's going to listen? Like, who wants to
Mm.
hear me? Just going through those things. And like, will anybody want to listen at all? And I was like, well, let's just do it and see what happens. And yeah, at the beginning, it'd be like, oh, 10 people listen. Yeah, it was
Uh-huh.
my mom and my
Yeah.
brother and like,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
but it was, yeah, those pieces of that. And I was really into like checking all of the, analytics. And then I was like, no, I'm going to let go of that. Who cares?
Uh-huh.
If it helps one person, it's worth it. And I get emails all the time now. I've had people say, I was thinking of ending my life. And then I
Oh,
heard your podcast
wow.
and I
Oh my gosh.
realized, like several people have told me this, I
Uh-huh.
realized I wasn't alone.
Uh-huh.
And that's what keeps me going. Cause I'm like, okay, we've been doing this for 5 years,
Yeah.
and we've had pivots, when my
Uh-huh.
co-host left and, um, just switch it directions. And now I'm going to start another podcast because I feel like there's the widow piece, but people kind of cycle out. They get tired of it
Yeah.
because they don't need it. And so I decided to start another one called Out of the Fog and Into the Light, rebuilding your
Ooh.
life when everything changes. And
Uh-huh.
so I'm going to be launching that in the next couple months, where it's all kinds of people's stories and focusing on the after, like, okay, wow,
Uh-huh.
what can I do with this instead of
Yeah.
just the story? And so, yeah, it's been really cool to see like where God has taken everything, and
Uh-huh.
I'm excited about the future. But yeah, I did have a little bit of doubt. I mean, a little bit, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's pretty natural to me.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it for sure. And I love that it is evolving and you're evolving with it because it could have been just a stepping stone. Like, okay,
Yeah.
if you're a widow, this is my resource. I'm, I'm going to refer you to Michelle's podcast and her
Hmm.
ministry. But then, yeah, but then once they get past that, it's like then you're either going to hand them off to somebody or you're like, hey, I'm in the same boat, right? There's still a path
Hmm.
ahead for me, and being able to support people through that. It's just,
Hmm.
yeah, I loved it. I love that you're starting a second podcast about that. I mean, that's super fun to think about. Like, this is this over here,
Yeah.
and this is this
Hmm.
over here, and people can choose their path and have two different assets that you can speak to and be able to market. So, are you thinking about writing another book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I know the title and everything. So,
Oh,
it's Water Walking Faith.
yeah.
And that's actually going to be that's the theme of our next retreat. So my goal is
Uh-huh.
to have it done and launched by October. And I think it's going to be like more of my life. So I wrote a book originally, like the year after Luke went through his first cancer, because there's a whole story. We don't have time to go into all of
Yeah.
it. But I
Yeah.
wrote a book called Cancer Can't Crush Us. And it was like my story with Luke, like the first year.
Uh-huh.
And then Widow Goals is not really my story. It's more like helping other people, little pieces of helping, my story. But I'm thinking Water Walking Faith will be more of my story and how
Uh-huh.
God led me through this, but also giving them tools that they can use to help them have water walking faith where, getting out of the boat and trusting Jesus.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, I do want to write another book. I'm also thinking of another grief book, kind of like
Uh-huh.
Widow Goals, because I've had a lot of people read it who aren't widowed, said it would
Uh-huh.
help them just changing some of
Yeah.
the verbiage. In fact, I have a senior group that I do a grief group with, and we're using Widow Goals, and they're not all widowed, but we're able to change the verbiage
Uh-huh.
to make it fit for them. And so that's another one that I'm thinking of. So those are the two that I'm like, which one do I want to
Yeah.
do next? I think I'm doing Water Walking Faith because of the retreat coming up next
Uh-huh.
October to launch it with that.
Yeah.
I'm also speaking at another retreat called Water Walking Faith. They're where I got the idea.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I said, can I copy that? And they're like, it's
Aw.
God's. You can copy it. I'm like, okay. Because I thought it was such a great title for a retreat and a book.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. Like just thinking of all the different ways you can kind of change things up, like you said,
yeah.
just like tweaking things. Cause I think about like under the grief category, like I'm a special needs mom and
Hmm.
that carries grief with it ongoing,
Yeah. Oh,
like there's that
definitely.
original grief and then it just pops up all the time
Yep.
unexpectedly. So
Hmm.
yeah, if you ever want to write another book, that's a good one that would be out there that
Yeah.
I don't feel like God's championed me to do it, but I think it's so needed. But yeah, there's so much I could say about that. I mean, it's just, yeah, so fun to see. I don't know, just how God's using it. And then, getting the feedback from women and then them be
Hmm.
able to share like, oh, well, this also kind of fits into this new struggle. And then you get to do that for them. So are you self-publishing your books?
Yes.
You sound
Yep.
like you're putting them together pretty quickly.
Yes.
So any tips for our audience that's thinking about doing the same? Maybe they've been podcasting about a certain thing.
Yeah.
They're still kind of working at their book topic, or there's a lot of people in our audience. Michelle, maybe you've been through this, especially going to She Speaks. I went many years, and it's always that thought you're trying to pitch to a traditional publisher. And then if
Hmm.
they say, it's not a fit or you don't have a big enough
Yeah.
platform, and then you're just like crushed, right? A lot of people kind of
Been
stay
there.
in that and don't
Uh-huh.
move forward. So speak to those groups of women,
Yeah.
just, looking back on what you've done.
Because I've done everything pitched to traditional. I also did subsidiary where I paid a company.
Uh-huh.
This company actually went out of business, so then I had to reprint my book and do all this
Uh-huh.
stuff. But don't let traditional publishing, if you don't get a deal, that doesn't mean your book isn't good. There's so
Uh-huh.
much competition now to get
Yeah.
your book. And like I got all the way to pub board with one of them.
Oh, wow.
But they told me there was another book similar, which I'm like, not exactly. But I got all the way to pub board and then they turned it down. But I was like, you know what? It still needs to get out there. Like
Uh-huh.
if you believe God's given you a mission and like a message to get out to the
Mhm.
world, then still do it. That doesn't mean your book's not good just because
Right.
somebody said we don't have the funds to do it.
Uh-huh.
I love self-publishing. Like I've done different ways, but I love being able to decide exactly what I want to do in my timeline. And, I hired, well, she did it for free. I have an editor and she's amazing. She's widowed and she's been blessed by my ministry. So her ministry is giving back to me being my editor. She's ready for the next book.
Yeah.
And so, of course you want to have an editor and all of that stuff. But don't let anybody stop you. If you really believe this is a message that has to get out there, there's room for all of us. And I do recommend, because I can see the difference from when I self-published when I didn't have a podcast to when I self-published with a podcast. It makes a difference. And so either start a podcast yourself or be a guest on many podcasts, because that's really the difference. My launch was huge this time compared to what it was before, because I had an audience, I had a community, I had people that wanted this. And so I would say, as you're writing your book, build your community online. And also, everybody can do a podcast. Like, it really isn't that hard these days. Like, it really isn't. I taught myself through YouTube, and now it's even easier. But make sure that you're building that community that's going to want your book specifically, because I think that's really, really important. That's what I've seen the difference of launching before and launching with an audience.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that, because that's what I think about with traditional publishing. That's, we all think like this platform word, we get all frustrated with it. But the reality is that's what they're asking for too, right? They're wanting to know that, okay, if we publish this book and put it out in the world, someone's going to read it. Right. And so they want you to be thinking about that ahead of time. And so I love the way you just said that, just thinking about how you are building up that audience so that they're anxiously awaiting for your book. And so that's another question I wanted to ask you, because I know a lot of people are hesitant. Like, if they're writing their book, it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe I'll do that after the book's ready, after the book's out on podcast, or I'll be a guest or whatever. And part of the hesitation is, I don't want to give away what's in the book. So what would you say to people that have that hesitation?
No, they're still going to buy it. Like, they want to know more. Like, I've never hesitate about sharing, like, everything that's in my book, because it's going to pique their interest. And if your goal is really to get the message out there, you don't care which way it gets out there. If it gets out there and they never buy your book, that's okay. Like, we don't need to be so concerned, as Christians. Like, our job is getting the message out there. And if they're going to buy the book, great. If not, it's okay. Like, I think we have to release the sales and, all of that stuff. Of course, we want to be able to make a living at it. But if it's really to get the message out there, don't worry about it. So I would say never hesitate to share what's in the book. I mean, you're not going to sit there and read your whole book. I mean, I've read pieces on my own podcast. I've read like certain chapters and things like that. But unless you're going to sit there and read your book for 4 or 5 hours, you're not going to give away the whole thing. So I say share.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And how long are your episodes typically on your show, Michelle?
Oh, they're all different, but they're usually an hour, hour and a half. 45 minutes.
Do you always have guests?
No, not every time, but the ones that are long, yes. The shorter ones are just me. So I have a podcast coach, and he taught me that you should be doing like 2 a week. So that's my new thing. And you should always, I learned this from another podcast, that you should become the expert. You should be on more than you have guests, so that people see you as an expert. And so I always want to go on there and talk myself rather than just having guests, like doing both, so that they see me as an expert. And even as I launched this new podcast, and he gave me a really good strategy. So what I'm going to do is, this new podcast is going to become my second podcast within Widowed Too Soon for about 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
Because I'm building up. So then I'm going to have my audience from Widowed Too Soon, and then I will launch it separately. Like, now go over here to find it. And so I'll have everybody follow me there. Plus I'll get all of the new people that aren't widowed. I was like, that's brilliant. I would have never thought about that. So he's giving me some really good strategies.
That's a great idea.
To launch that.
Yeah. So you're launching your new show basically to your existing audience, right? And letting them know.
And then
attracting new.
Yes. And then once I put that one over in a separate one, I'll go back to just me talking on the second episode every week. So the first one is interviews. The second one is me talking.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I love that so much. Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh, so good. I know we could talk for hours about this, Michelle, but I'm going to let you go for today. And I'm just so excited to keep my eyes peeled out to what God does through your ministry.
Thank you.
I'm just so glad to connect with you today. It's been so fun. And it just gives me chills to see what God's doing. I mean, we just can never underestimate what he's doing with our pain and misery and how he can use it for the better, for sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, you too.
Oh, I just love Michelle's heart to serve. But if hearing all the incredible things God is doing through her makes your own head spin, thinking, if He called me to do all that, I would be so burnt out. Well, my next episode is for you. My friend Vivian is returning to share encouragement from her new devotional, Break Down Better. She's sharing her journey of podcasting while writing and growing her platform for her debut book, all while avoiding overwhelm herself. I can't wait for you to hear it. Thanks for tuning into Book Marketing Mania, and as always, I'll be there for you next episode to help you reach and serve your readers one podcast at a time. See you then.